Hello everybody, so in today's video I'm going to be brewing a beer style that's new to me, and I'm going to be using one of these brand new yeasts from Lallemand. This is their hybrid farmhouse strain, which is a saison style yeast. So there's going to be lots to talk about for both of those things, so let's get into it. So let's start with this new yeast strain from Lallemand. Now strap in because there's quite a bit of detail here and it might take a little bit of time to get through it all. So Farmhouse is a hybrid yeast that has been created using selective breeding techniques, not GMO or genetically modified processes, which would mean we wouldn't be able to use it in the UK anyway. And it's been done to create a yeast with that classic kind of saison character, but at the same time to remove the gene responsible for diastatic activity, as well as eliminating any production of H2S or hydrogen sulfide by the yeast. So what is the issue with diastatic yeast, and why would it be beneficial to remove that trait from a saison yeast? So the diastaticus variant of beer yeast can break down longer chain carbohydrates or dextrins in the wort, which normal beer yeast cannot do. This is due to an enzyme they secrete called glucoamylase, which will break down those dextrins. Now, obviously, this can be beneficial where you want to produce a very highly attenuated and dry beer, such as a saison, which is one of the reasons why a lot of traditional saison strains are diastaticus variants. However, this can pose a problem in the brew house, because any trace of these diastatic yeasts which get into other parts of the brewery or essentially are transferred into other batches using normal brewer's yeast can cause secondary fermentations after the packaging stage, which can obviously result in various problems. For example, off flavors. So you're going to end up with kind of, saison-like phenolic notes in beers which perhaps are not supposed to have them. It can end up with an increased alcohol percentage above the original spec for that beer. You might end up with very overcarbonated and kind of gushing bottles or cans. And in the worst case of that, you might end up with packaging failure, i.e. exploding cans or bottles, and potential injuries as a result of that, which obviously in a commercial setting is a serious consideration and something that has actually resulted in quite a few commercial breweries having to recall batches of beer due to diastaticus cross-contamination or infection, if you want to call it that. So essentially, the farmhouse strain removes any risk of diastaticus transfer or infection into subsequent beers after you've done a saison style batch with this particular yeast. Now, removing H2S production from the strain is a lot easier to explain, because hydrogen sulfide is responsible for the kind of rotten egg off flavour or aroma that you can get in beers, and obviously that's something that a lot of people would like to avoid generally in their batches. So getting rid of that as well is kind of an added bonus, or the potential for that anyway. So that's what you don't get with the farmhouse strain, but what does this yeast deliver as far as flavours, aroma and performance? If we start by looking at the flavour and aroma chart or wheel, which is off of the spec sheet for this yeast, you can see that there are prominent pepper and maybe more surprisingly tropical fruit notes present, as well as noticeable clove, acidic and alcoholic notes in there as well. This yeast will maintain a high attenuation range up to 84%, and alcohol tolerance up to 13% as well. Fermentation range for temperature is going to be between 22 and 30 degrees, and you will see a fermentation which is going to be vigorous and potentially complete within 5 days, especially towards the top end of that temperature range as well. That temperature range is obviously going to influence the performance of the yeast pretty significantly as well in terms of the flavour profile delivered. So according to the testing and research or feedback from breweries and other people that tested this yeast for Lallemand, you will see increased esters as the temperature goes up, which is pretty common with most yeasts, I guess. You will see reduced clove at higher fermentation range, but increased pepper notes at that range. So you'll get a different kind of phenolic character to the beer depending on where you are in that temperature range. And generally speaking, if you're looking for a more kind of traditional saison-like character, aiming at the kind of 25 to 30 bracket for temperature is where you want to be. If you want a maybe more kind of Belgian blonde or almost kind of wit beer and Weiss beer kind of character in there, then the lower range bracket between 20 and 25 will potentially give you more of that as well. So enough about the yeast. Let's talk about the Grisette style that we're going to be brewing with it. It's not a very widely known beer style, but it is very close to a saison. It's actually quite closely linked to that style. Think of it as a kind of lower ABV or kind of table strength version of that beer. There's not a huge amount of information available on the style, either kind of current or in the historical record for what the beer is supposed to be. But I did find a lot of useful information on articles from Bison Brew and the Milk Funk website, which I will put links to in the description. So yeah, kudos to those guys, and go and check those out if you want to sort of read into it in a bit more detail. So just to summarize some of the characteristics that we would be looking for in this kind of beer, according to those sources. So it's going to be a very highly carbonated kind of table strength version of a saison. You are going to have, or you should have, noticeable but not dominant kind of hop presence. There's a little bit more of an emphasis on late hopping with the Grisette as opposed to what you might see in a typical saison, and that can include relatively low levels of dry hopping as well as late boil additions. You're looking for a fairly rustic kind of grain character, which may include some unmalted adjuncts. So a sort of 70-30 split between base malt and wheat is typical, and you might have some unmalted wheat or oats in there as well. Fermentation obviously should be using a fairly expressive saison strain, and will often be run at a fairly high kind of temperature in order to get that expression from the yeast. You can also do this with a mixed fermentation, so you can get some bacteria in there if you want to funk it up a little bit. And you could also do kind of secondary fermentation on fruit, which you can see in a few modern examples as well. So overall, putting all those things together, we're looking for the key feature of this beer to be drinkability. It should be refreshing, light, and easy on the palate, but still with some good character to it from the yeast and the hops as well. So yeah, that's enough background info. Let's go through the recipe that I've put together for this, again based on the information from those previous websites, which are in the description, and we'll quickly go through that and a bit of brew footage, and then come back for a tasting of the beer itself. Right then, so here we have the finished beer, and this has only been in the keg for a couple of weeks now, but according to the information I was reading, you're supposed to drink these fresh, so who am I to stand in the way of tradition on that front? As you can see, it's got a fair bit of haze on it, which isn't that surprising given the amount of wheat and oats that are in there, and also obviously with it being fairly young at the moment as well, but has started to clear a little bit, but yeah, really it's got a, you know, fairly very light but still quite opaque kind of look to it. There's a lovely fluffy kind of white head on the top, although that has dropped away a little bit already as we're speaking about it. And the colour is, yeah, just very, very light kind of straw, but it looks pretty nice to me in the glass. And yeah, you can't really see it on the camera, I wouldn't think, but there is kind of streaming carbonation coming up there. So I have carved this one up fairly high, again, as per the kind of guidelines off of those articles for this style. So just coming back to the brewing on this for a second before we get into the tasting, I did miss the original gravity by a couple of points. I think that was just down to me not accounting for the higher level of wheat and oats in the grist, which I quite often forget to do. So that just tends to knock my efficiency down a little bit, maybe because it's not quite as free flowing through the grain bed or something. So the ABV came out at 3.4 rather than 3.7, but that's pretty much well within the specified spec or range for this style anyway, so that's not too much of an issue and just makes it even more sessionable than it already was. As far as the yeast, how it performed for me during the fermentation, it absolutely ripped through this beer. It was over in about 2 days, so it was a very low gravity work to begin with, but even so, sort of 2 days pretty much to ferment out. I think by third day I'd confirmed it was definitely at final gravity. So it was rapid, and again, for a beer that's supposed to be drunk fresh, you can probably turn this round in a week and have it on tap ready to drink. So again, another useful thing for a summer beer that you want to get on tap nice and quickly. So let's get into testing this out and seeing what it actually smells and tastes like. So on the aroma, there is a really nice, light, kind of hoppy note there. There is some fruitiness, so I don't know if I'd go as far as saying tropical fruit, but maybe there is a little touch of banana on there. So there's a little bit of that kind of Belgian or Weiss beer sort of banana note, but very, very subtle. And then maybe some spiciness. So yeah, kind of hop spiciness, but perhaps a little bit of pepperiness or clove from the yeast. And the fruitiness is not really kind of citrusy, or I wouldn't say tropical, but maybe a little bit of kind of light sort of melony aroma there. Maybe some apple, but it's very pleasant as far as the aroma goes. And there's just a kind of light, very light kind of grainy malt sweetness there, but that's certainly in the background compared to what we're getting from the kind of yeast there and a little bit from the hops. So taste test. The first thing you notice is the very high carbonation, so that definitely helps to kind of lift the sort of mouthfeel on this one. Very effervescent, and it kind of brings out the hop notes there a bit as well. So there's definitely I said there wasn't really much citrus on the aroma, but on the flavour there's definitely a kind of lemony note there. So it's that kind of SARS, slight hint of lemon kind of flavour that you get from that hop, and some hop spice as well. And then you get kind of pepper at the end. So the fruity aroma that I was getting before doesn't really carry into the flavour that much. There's maybe, again, just a very soft kind of background fruitiness there, but the peppery kind of yeast character comes through for me a lot stronger on the flavour, and it's definitely got that sort of saison character to it. It's really drinkable, very light, but packing quite a bit of flavour in there as far as kind of yeast character. Nice subtle hoppiness. The bitterness is not prominent, but it's, you know, you can tell that there's a decent amount of bittering in there for a lower gravity or ABV beer, and I think that really contributes to just making it really drinkable as well. So I'm really pleased with how this has come out, especially for a style that it's the first time I've ever brewed, also using a brand new yeast as well. And I feel like this compares pretty well to the kind of commercial examples of grisettes that I've tried previously, from people like Duration and the Colonel, both of which were very good, by the way, if you want to try out some commercial versions. And this is going to make a perfect barbecue beer for me. It's just something that's a little bit of a change up from the, you know, really hoppy kind of pale ales and IPAs and stuff, which obviously I brew a lot of, but it's nice to have something a little bit different, especially in this kind of lower ABV kind of table beer or session beer sort of category, and something that's a little bit more yeast led as well, which is a nice change up too. So I think it's definitely worth having a go at this if that sounds like something that you'd like to have on tap. And yeah, this recipe's worked pretty well for me, so why not give that a go if you fancy trying it out. Cheers. Hello everyone, and thanks for watching this video. I just wanted to let you know about a few ways that you can support this channel, which will help me to produce better quality content and get it released a bit more regularly. Firstly, please make sure that you've subscribed to the channel. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and leave me a comment if you can as well. You can even show your appreciation by making a small donation using the thanks button. And don't forget to ring the little bell if you want to get notified whenever new content is released on the channel. Another thing that you can do is to check out the video description, where you'll find some affiliate links to equipment, books and other general gadgets that I use in the brewery and would personally recommend. If you order through those affiliate links, it will generate a small commission for me at no extra cost to yourself. Finally, if you're in the UK and you're looking for some beers to maybe inspire your next brew, or you just want to try out some great UK breweries, then I can highly recommend Brews, who will give you and me an £8 discount on a case of beer if you use this referral code. These guys provide a great beer subscription service where you get to choose a specific brewery for each box from a really good selection, including some of my personal favourites like Track, Braybrook, Verdant, Baron, Burnt Mill, amongst many, many others. So thanks for listening, and if you can support the channel in any of those ways at all, it will be greatly appreciated. Cheers.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness or duder or, you know, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.